They say you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. Truer words, I guess. I'm Claire, 32, and I feel like my world shattered over a conversation Joseph wasn't even meant to overhear. Now, I'm cramped in this tiny apartment, staring at a pile of overdue bills, and I can't wrap my head around how everything spiraled out of control so damn fast. Joseph and we were together for 7 years. He definitely wasn't the man of my dreams when we first met, more like the stable choice when I was so over dating guys who couldn't hold down a job. He was an HVAC tech back then, not a glamorous job, but reliable. My job at the medical billing office wasn't amazing money, but it was okay. And between us, we managed to afford a decent townhouse in a respectable neighborhood. It was good in the beginning. Joseph was attentive, always fixing things around the house, and we got along well enough. My sister Brooke always commented on how lucky I was to have found a good one. I'd smile and nod, but if I was honest with myself, I always felt like I could have done better. Like I had settled down too early when my college friends were still dating doctors and entrepreneurs. The shift happened when Joseph got promoted to a management position last year. Suddenly, he was bringing home significantly more money, which should have been great, right? But with the promotion came this new, super responsible attitude about our finances that drove me up the wall. He started questioning every single purchase on our joint account, drawing up budgets, constantly talking about saving for the future. "Do you really need another pair of shoes, Claire?" he'd ask, eyeing the shopping bags I'd bring home. "Remember, we're trying to save for a down payment on a real house." What he didn't seem to understand was that I worked hard for my money, too. Sure, he covered the mortgage and the car payments and most of the utilities, but I paid for the groceries and my own car insurance. In my mind, whatever money was left over was mine to spend however I pleased. But Joseph acted like every dollar should go straight into our joint savings account. That's why I started a separate account that he knew nothing about. Nothing shady, just a place to stash away a little from each paycheck so I could buy things without having to justify every single purchase. I told myself that he was just being controlling, that his higher income had somehow given him power over me. Deep down, I knew he was just trying to be responsible. Then Vanessa started at the billing office, and that's really when things went south. Vanessa was everything I wasn't. Recently divorced, carefree, and living her best life, or at least that's what her Instagram portrayed. Unlike my friends who were always praising Joseph, Vanessa actually listened when I vented about my marriage. "Men like that are so typical," she said during our first happy hour. "They get a little power and suddenly think they run the show. My ex was the same way." Finally, someone who actually understood. We started grabbing lunch together every day, and our conversations revolved around how suffocating my marriage had become. With each conversation, my perception of Joseph shifted further from the caring, hard-working man he was into this controlling tyrant who was supposedly making my life miserable. The other Friday night, after one too many margaritas with Vanessa, he asked about a $200 withdrawal from our joint account. Like I'm a child who needs to report every single purchase, I had ranted to Vanessa. What I left out, of course, was that the $200 went straight into my secret account, which now held nearly $3,000 that Joseph didn't know existed. That's financial abuse. Vanessa had declared dramatically, "He's trying to control you through money." I nodded eagerly, loving how she validated my complaints without question. Meanwhile, Joseph kept trying. He'd suggest weekend getaways or movie nights, but I always found excuses, then turned around and complained to Vanessa about how boring his ideas were. When he brought up starting a family, I shut down completely. "We can't afford kids," I snapped, even though his careful financial planning had actually put us in a pretty good position. "We've been saving," he'd said, confusion written all over his face. "That's literally what we've been working toward." "Maybe your finances," I muttered under my breath, thinking of my secret account, which I had earmarked for a solo trip to Europe, not diapers and daycare. Work became my escape. One evening, while working late, I found myself alone with Craig from accounting, tall, single, with that confident smirk that always made me a little nervous in a good way. "Your husband doesn't mind you working so late?" he asked, leaning against my desk. "Joseph doesn't control my schedule," I replied a little too sharply, enjoying the way Craig raised his eyebrows, impressed. When I got home that night, Joseph had waited up for me, a plate of dinner carefully covered in the microwave. Instead of seeing it as thoughtful, I just felt annoyance bubbling up, like his kindness was somehow a trap, another way to make me feel obligated to him. By the time Joseph suggested hosting a backyard barbecue for Memorial Day weekend, I was living in a completely different reality than he was. Our marriage wasn't just on different pages. We were reading entirely different books. I spent the entire week leading up to the barbecue complaining to Vanessa about how Joseph was forcing me to host all of his work friends. He'd asked if I was okay with the party idea. That's true. But I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram at the time and barely registered the question before mumbling an agreement. Taking Vanessa's advice a little too seriously, I raided our joint account and stocked up on several bottles of ridiculously expensive Cabernet. When Joseph saw the receipt later, he raised an eyebrow, and I instantly turned on the waterworks, complaining about how he wanted to have people over but didn't want to actually spend any money on it. The party started at 3 me. Neighbors and Joseph's co-workers trickled into the backyard. I forced a smile, playing the perfect hostess while secretly counting down the minutes until everyone would leave. Joseph was in his element, happily grilling burgers and cracking jokes, occasionally glancing my way with this hopeful look, as if a stupid party could somehow magically fix everything. Vanessa, of course, arrived fashionably late, making a grand entrance in a sundress that had every guy there turning his head. 2 glasses of wine in, and I was already feeling a bit more relaxed, although my laughter was probably a little too loud, and my stories were definitely a little too animated. As the afternoon wore on, Joseph ambled over to our group. "Hey, I have an early meeting tomorrow. Maybe we should start wrapping things up around 8 he suggested, trying to keep his voice down. "God, we just got started," I retorted, making sure everyone heard me. Always so controlling. By 7 I was on my 4th glass of wine and feeling wonderfully numb. Joseph had retreated into full-on hosting mode, dutifully cleaning up discarded plates and making sure everyone's glasses were full. Vanessa and I had migrated to the patio furniture with Craig from accounting and his friend Mike. The topic of conversation drifted to relationships. "My ex never understood the concept of personal space," Mike was saying. "Always needed to know where I was, who I was with." "Joseph's like that," I blurted out, which was a complete lie, actually. "So suffocating sometimes." Craig chuckled. "You seem like the independent type who wouldn't put up with that for long." Something about the way he said it made me instinctively straighten my posture, toss my hair back a little too dramatically. "You have no idea." "So what keeps you around?" he asked, leaning in slightly, his eyes on me. The wine, the attention, the weeks of building this carefully constructed false narrative about my marriage, it all collided in that moment. I hadn't noticed Joseph quietly come out to the patio to gather empty glasses. I didn't realize he was standing right behind the sliding door, listening. I lowered my voice conspiratorially. I'd totally cheat if I knew I'd never get caught. Joseph's been so controlling lately. Honestly, he doesn't even deserve my loyalty. Vanessa giggled nervously, while Craig's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Mike averted his gaze uncomfortably, but I was on a roll now, the words tumbling out without a filter. He thinks because he pays most of the bills, he gets to dictate everything. Meanwhile, I'm just biding my time, quietly building my escape fund. I gestured dramatically with my wine glass. 7 years with Mr. Reliable. I've definitely put in my time. That's when I registered the collective shift in everyone's eyes, all focused on something behind me. I turned, half expecting to see another neighbor. Maybe Sarah with her perpetually judgmental expression. Instead, there was Joseph, frozen in the doorway, a stack of paper plates precariously balanced in his hands, with this look on his face that I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even hurt, it was just clarity. Our eyes met for a brief, excruciating moment, and then, without a single word, he silently set the plates down, turned on his heel, and walked back into the house. I should have gone after him immediately. I should have tried to explain that it was the wine talking, that I didn't actually mean any of it, but some stubborn, stupid part of me thought he deserved to stew in it for a little while, maybe realize what happens when he tries to ruin my fun. By the time I finally went inside, Joseph was nowhere to be found. The kitchen was spotless. He'd already cleaned up everything. Our bedroom door was firmly closed. I ended up falling asleep on the couch, still wearing my party clothes, telling myself that we'd talk it out in the morning, and this would just become another story about Joseph being overly sensitive. I had absolutely no idea that I had just detonated my entire life with one stupid, drunken confession. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache, still wearing the same clothes from the day before. The house was eerily silent, no coffee brewing, no shower running. I glanced at my phone. 10:37 a.m. Joseph's car was missing from the driveway. I tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. By evening, with still no word from him, I was oscillating wildly between genuine worry and indignant frustration. I texted Vanessa. Jay disappeared after the party, being dramatic as usual. She sent back a wide-eyed emoji. Maybe he's really upset about what you said. Please, I replied. It's not like I actually cheated, it was just talk. Monday morning, I got ready for work as usual, half expecting to find Joseph asleep in the guest room or something equally ridiculous. The house remained stubbornly empty. By lunchtime, with still absolutely no contact, a tiny seed of real, undeniable worry had finally begun to take root and grow. I arrived home that evening to the sight of Joseph's car in the driveway. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a sharp sting of irritation. All day, I'd been consumed with worry, and he couldn't even bother to send a simple text message. As I stepped inside, something about the living room felt off. My gaze was immediately drawn to the empty space above the fireplace, where our large honeymoon photo used to hang. Now just a lone nail remained on the wall. The usual stack of books he kept on the coffee table was also missing, and his laptop wasn't in its usual spot on the desk. "Joseph," I called out, dropping my purse onto the kitchen counter. "Where have you been? I was so worried about you." He emerged from the hallway carrying a duffel bag. His face was strangely composed, a calm I didn't recognize and I didn't like. There was no anger, no tears, none of the emotion I had anticipated. It was just nothing. "I needed some time to think," he said, his voice even and controlled, which sent a shiver of unease down my spine. "And to get some things in order." "What things? Why are you packing a bag?" I asked, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Don't you think you're overreacting a little? It was just some stupid, drunken talk." He looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing a stranger. "It wasn't just drunken talk, Claire. It was the truth, or at least confirmation of what I've been suspecting for a while now." Without a word, Joseph handed me a thick folder. Inside were divorce papers, already filled out. My name, his name. A cold, clinical description of assets to be divided. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "This is insane," I managed, my voice strained. "You're filing for divorce because of one stupid comment at a party?" His expression remained calm. "No, Claire. I'm filing for divorce because you've made it abundantly clear that you don't respect me, don't value our marriage, and are actively planning to cheat if the opportunity presents itself." The quietness in his voice was somehow even more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. "You called me controlling. You told our friends you're biding your time and building an escape fund. You said I don't deserve loyalty." I was drunk. I was just trying to impress Vanessa and that guy from accounting. I pleaded, hoping to somehow lessen the impact of my words. Does that make it better? He just shook his head slightly. Even if you were exaggerating, the sentiment is real. That's how you truly see me, as someone you settled for, someone you're trapped with. Where have you been staying? I asked, abruptly changing the subject, my mind reeling, desperately trying to catch up with the reality that was unfolding. With my brother. I've been consulting with a lawyer. He picked up his bag again. I've already separated our finances. The joint account has enough to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next 3 months, which should give us time to decide what to do with the house. Separated our finances? You can't just do that. Panic started rising, sharp and insistent. That's our money. Actually, I can, particularly since I've been documenting your pattern of withdrawals to your secret account for the past 6 months. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? The account at First Federal, the one you've been transferring money to from our joint account. His eyes were flat, unreadable. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I'm the controlling one who watches our finances, remember? That's my money, I said weakly, trying to regain some ground. From my paycheck. We'll let the court decide that. He moved towards the door. I'll be staying at Ryan's for now. You can't just walk out, I was shouting now, the full force of the situation finally hitting me. We need to talk about this. He paused at the door. That's the thing, Claire, we're past talking. You've been saying everything I needed to hear for months now. I just wasn't listening. And then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a terrible finality. The next few weeks were a blur of panic, denial, and desperate attempts to regain control. I called Joseph constantly at first, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry accusations to tearful apologies to pathetic attempts at manipulation. He responded only by text, brief and businesslike messages about logistics and finances. Even my sister Brooke, who I'd always expected to take my side, seemed distant when I called to tell her about the separation. "What exactly did you say at this party?" she asked cautiously. When I repeated my words, there was a long, uncomfortable silence. "Claire," she finally said, "how would you feel if Joseph had said that about you?" "It's different," I insisted, trying to justify my actions. "He's been so controlling lately." "By controlling, do you mean he questions your spending from your joint account, the account you're both supposed to be using to save for your future?" The last shred of my delusion shattered when I received an email from his lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss asset division. The documents lay on the table, a brutal autopsy of our shared life. Every transfer to that secret account, every date, time, and amount meticulously recorded. There were even transcripts of those text messages with Vanessa, my snide remarks about Joseph, calling him controlling, boring, admitting I'd settled. Sitting across from Joseph and his lawyer felt like being pinned under a microscope. He was so composed, so prepared. I, on the other hand, felt trapped, suffocating. The terms weren't even outrageous. The house would be sold, the proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, personal belongings separated. It was the detached efficiency of it all that stung the most, the clinical way he was dismantling the life we had built together. "We request that Ms. Mimi Mitchell provide a full accounting of the funds transferred to her private account," his lawyer stated, his voice flat. "That money came from my paychecks," I retorted, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. Ms. Mitchell's contributions to joint expenses were, shall we say, minimal. The lawyer continued, pushing a spreadsheet across the table. Mr. Barrett covered approximately 78% of household expenses, allowing Ms. Mitchell to accumulate her personal income while benefiting from his financial support. The stark reality hit me like a physical blow. There it was, in black and white. Joseph had been carrying us financially far more than I'd ever admitted, even to myself. All the while, I was obsessively building my escape fund and complaining about his controlling tendencies, he was quietly shouldering the vast majority of our responsibilities. The true humiliation, though, began when the whispers started. Friends, those confidants to whom I'd vented about Joseph's supposed control, now regarded me with barely concealed judgment. Even Craig from accounting, who'd always flirted, seemed to avoid me, clearly uninterested in the newly single woman. A year has passed, and I find myself in this cramped one-bedroom apartment, drowning in past-due notices. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. We sold the townhouse, divided the money, and went our separate ways. I foolishly assumed my half of the house money would last much longer. But between the first and last month's rent, the bare minimum of new furniture, and my increasingly frequent emotional shopping sprees, it vanished with terrifying speed. My precious escape fund, the one I'd been so proud of, was gone within 3 months. Turns out, supporting myself solely on a medical billing specialist's salary is significantly harder than sharing expenses with an HVAC manager. Last month brought another blow. My sister, Brooke, invited me to a family barbecue. And there he was, Joseph, with Melissa, a kindergarten teacher with a genuinely warm smile and a natural ease around our nieces and nephews. He looked good, happier, more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Likely because he wasn't constantly walking on eggshells around a wife who relentlessly criticized him. They bought a house together, Brooke told me later, that fixer-upper on Maple Street. Joseph's been renovating it himself, and he got another promotion at work. Later, while helping in the kitchen, mostly trying to avoid eye contact, I overheard my mom and Melissa talking. "He's so thoughtful," Melissa was saying. "Last week I casually mentioned wanting to try that new Italian place, and he made reservations for my birthday without me even having to remind him." "That's Joseph," my mom replied, her voice full of warmth. "Always been considerate that way." I slipped away before they could see me, a painful knot forming in my throat. He had been considerate. He'd paid attention to the little things I mentioned wanting or needing, then surprised me with them. He cooked meals, fixed things around the house, and supported my career choices, even when they meant less money for us. Where did my disdain for all of that even come from? On the drive home, the memories came flooding back, not of the controlling monster I'd fabricated, but of the patient, loving man who had actually been my husband. The time he stayed up all night with me when I had food poisoning. How he never complained about working overtime so we could afford the townhouse I so desperately wanted. The way he looked at me on our wedding day, as if he couldn't quite believe his own good fortune. In that moment, I was finally forced to confront the truth I'd been desperately avoiding. Joseph hadn't been the problem in our marriage. I had. I was so consumed by what I thought I deserved, by the life I imagined I should have had, that I completely devalued the wonderful life I actually did have. I constructed a false narrative in which I was trapped with a controlling man I'd settled for, when the reality was that I was deeply loved by someone I utterly failed to appreciate. As I pull into the parking lot of my apartment complex, so starkly different from the well-maintained townhouse community we'd lived in, I notice a notice taped to my door, undoubtedly another late payment reminder. My phone buzzes with a text from the latest guy I've been seeing, canceling our plans yet again. The hardest part isn't the financial struggle or the crushing loneliness or even watching Joseph find happiness with someone else. It's the agonizing realization that I did this to myself. I destroyed something precious because I was too self-absorbed to see what I had. If only I could go back to that party, retract all of those carelessly spoken words, maybe things would be different, but life doesn't work that way. There's no rewind button for the consequences of our actions, no do-over for the people we hurt. All that remains for me is to face each bill, each empty evening, each painful reminder of what I lost, and desperately hope that one day I'll learn enough from this devastating mistake to even deserve someone half as good as the man I threw away.